Welcome to the Barbell Strategy Podcast,
where we talk about coaching,
training,
and all things strength and conditioning
to help the fitness athlete,
CrossFitter, and the coach. Please share and enjoy.
So today's podcast, we're going to be talking about competition, and we're going to be going over the preparation before a competition. We're going to be going over what we're doing in a competition, how we're supporting athletes, what are some of the things that we're looking for as coaches. And then finally, probably I would say the most important is the review post-competition and what that is going to do leading into the next training block. And especially so with competitors who are a little bit more advanced, and that's just because they will be using the information from competition to competition and sort of iterating their process and their training plan. Their priorities per se are probably going to be a bit more well established and just always being worked on in the background. And the main things that will impact their program block to block, year to year, is going to be the results of competitions and things that come up and that might trip them up. And the sort of various situations that we also need to make sure that we're ready for. So, Sam, let's start off with a plan. So when you're starting to work with a new client, if they show any interest in competitions, is it usually like someone saying, "Oh, I've got a competition in 4 weeks' time, can you help me out with that?" Or is it more, are they coming up to you and saying, "I want to qualify for, semi-finals in the next 3 years, long term"?
Yeah, it varies. And I think one of the questions that I ask people when I first start to work with them, I get them to kind of talk about how the next 3, 6, 12 months might look for them and what they're aiming for over that period of time. And generally within that, there'll be certain competitions which either they're already signed up for, ready to go, or they might be targeting and they want to try and qualify for. So it varies quite a bit. I think naturally, just depending on when you start with someone, there are times when, like, I've already signed up for this competition, it's in 4 weeks' time, what can we do to get ready for it? And other times, like you say, there's people who they've got like a long-term goal that they want to work towards. I think that's changed quite a lot. I think I think when I first started coaching, a lot of people, they were like really aiming for semi-finals. But I think with all the changes that get made every year now and people not really knowing where they stand in terms of how they qualify, I feel like that's kind of stopped a little bit. Now people focus on more regular competitions that might be happening within their region instead, which in some ways makes it easier, because I think there's a lot more, you know what it's going to be and you know how to qualify for it, but also you can look back on, I think each competition generally has a little bit of a theme and things that they like to try and do, so it makes it a little bit easier to kind of almost train for, because you can pick out those themes, you can look back at past workouts and that compared to...
Yeah, I think doing in-person competitions is just so much better than just putting all of your eggs in one basket and trying to qualify for a big competition. Even from my own personal experience, I definitely didn't do enough local or smaller competitions at a certain stage. And then when I sort of learnt that, I think I did a little bit too many. Got a little bit burnt out by it. But I think it's good, interesting to hear what you said about the 3, 6 and 12 months, because that's generally what I'm trying to get with athletes as well. I think maybe trying to think beyond that is quite difficult for people to do, and I don't think anyone really actually does. Even those individuals who do compete at a high level in the sport, and they maybe retroactively think about it and say, "Oh yeah, I've been doing this for years and been planning and preparing for this for years," but I don't think anyone actually sits down and says, "Oh, I'm going to qualify at this level and this year." I think everyone's just trying to just push it as hard as they can, and the cards will fall where they fall, and it's a little bit more of this like iterative process. Whereas I did come across one person once, and I think they were into spreadsheets. They actually worked in finance, and I think they tried to figure out some way of qualifying for masters age group at some stage, and I think he had it down to like every little detail, and movements and everything. I was thinking to myself, I was like, mate, this is not like you need to crack on, just focus on your training.
I think that's it though. You can have the best plan in the world, but when it actually comes down to it, it doesn't count for very much in sport, in any sport, not just in CrossFit. You know, because anything can happen at any point within that 12 months that can throw off even the best plan. You know, so there has to be that fluidity, and if you're too rigid in what you're thinking, it can actually be quite frustrating and have a negative effect. Whereas staying a little bit more relaxed about it, yes, okay, you might have an overarching goal, but try not.
I think you've got to make sure you have something in front of you to train for. There is going to be periods where maybe you're not looking for anything, you don't have anything on the horizon, but at least just having, okay, I know in about 6 months' time I'm probably going to do another competition and I'm going to take this seriously. You know, and you might have a couple on your mind. What would you say though, because I think that sometimes people can either just overdo it or really underdo it. What would you say you would recommend to your athletes in terms of, you know, the competitions that they choose, you know, depending on the level of athlete they are, where they're at, their experience level, these types of things? What are some of the conversations you're having? If are you having to tell your athletes, hey, let's do a little bit less, or even actually try to nudge them forward and do it, because otherwise their training is sort of just training otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I think with beginners, or not necessarily beginners, but people who are new to competing, I try to encourage them to compete pretty consistently and in different kinds of competitions as well. You know, sometimes on their own, sometimes in a team, sometimes in pairs, just so they get that exposure and they can also figure out, and it helps like them and me figure out where they might be relative to other people. Because I think when you've come from just been doing the classes in your gym, say, or just competing against people in your gym, understanding the wider CrossFit world and where you fit within that is quite important, because otherwise it can be a little bit of a shock to the system when you go from winning every workout in the class to then being, you know, relatively average versus the other people you're competing against. Sometimes mentally for people, they need to get used to that a little bit. But I think as well, and again, this depends on people's backgrounds, but people who haven't perhaps come from a strong sporting background, then learning how to compete, how to manage yourself through a competition day, manage your warm-ups, your cool-downs, your nutrition, your just general adrenaline, all that kind of stuff, that comes with experience. So I think getting out there and competing early on is very worthwhile in that sense, especially because you know at that point you have got a lot to work on. But it's when you then go into that next stage where there's perhaps less to work on, but you have to spend more time working on those things, there's more skills to learn. You kind of got past that point where almost anything works in your training because you're doing things for the first time. Then that's when I would say to people, kind of ease back on the competing a little bit, so we have bigger windows of time where we can be very specific with their training. You know, because if people are trying to learn some like technical gymnastic skills and get them up to a competition standard, that's not going to happen if you're competing every 6 weeks and having a taper week before, a recovery week afterwards. Your windows are very small when really you just need consistency at that point, working on one or two things at a time. But then I think it almost goes full circle then when you get to being a more of an elite level, when you can do everything, then you can get back to competing more often again. But then at that point, then I would say there's tiers to competition, isn't there? You've got like your semi-finals where it's 3 days, it's intense, it's going to take a lot out of you. And then you might have your 1, maybe 2 day comps that are a little bit less intense that you're still gaining from, but they're not necessarily what you're peaking for in that particular year. You know, so maybe having 2 or 3 big comps a year with then a couple of other smaller ones, that can work quite well for people once they reach that stage, from what I've seen.
Yeah. One thing I've always been surprised with is just seeing like the good athletes, high level athletes competing in small things. And I think it's just more of a, they're individuals who know that they're going to qualify for these big competitions, potentially games and that type of thing. But then you just see them jumping in on like a team thing for one day or something like that. Sometimes that surprises me, and I think it's more just because, well, I like to think that there should be a plan behind everything and all these types of things. And sometimes that just looks a little bit like it's unplanned, or whether it is just a, off the cuff decision. Is it the best thing that's going to help with all of their other training? But I think sometimes that comes from it's it's accidentally a really good way of preparing them for the sport, but I think it just comes from just wanting to have a good time and just enjoy themselves.
Yeah, that's it. It's enjoyment, because I think, like for me, when I was competing individually, especially when you're trying to get to regionals, like mentally, you're doing everything by yourself, you're training by yourself, you're competing by yourself. There's a little bit more pressure. Whereas when you then say, I might do something like strength in depth, where you're in a team with 12 other people, all from the gym, and you know, and again, especially if you're at that top level, you might know that relative to other people in the team, you're up there. So there is less pressure, and you can just go enjoy the weekend, socialise, and just almost get back to why you started competing or doing CrossFit in the first place, which was because you enjoyed it before you realised, actually, I'm good enough to compete at a high level in this.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely there's a balance there. Yeah, I think it definitely depends, although a bit on like what it is you like about training and that type of thing. And I think for me, part of training is having a process, having a plan, having an idea of where I'm, going to executing that. So sometimes just jumping in on something, like I did that last year in September, and I just felt a bit frustrated doing it because I was like, I should have been able to prepare better. I should have been able to do this, and trying to manage preparing that for that competition with everything else going on. It was nowhere near what I had done previously, and I found that a bit frustrating. But I think there's also just like a bit of learning there as well that you need to do. So if you are going through different phases of your training career where competition might be lower stakes or less important, then I think that sometimes takes a bit of learning. And I've had that with a few athletes where they said, I'm just going to compete for fun now. And then they get into competitions and they get super frustrated because they don't feel as prepared. They are comparing themselves obviously to what they were able to do before, and they're like, I feel slower than I was before. It's like, yes, because you train let's say 60% of what you used to do, so that's gonna happen.
That's it. I can relate to that, and to be fair, that's probably why I don't really compete anymore.
Yeah,
it's that frustration that comes with knowing, if this was 5 years ago, I would have got this, whereas now I can only do this, and it's accepting that isn't always super easy.
Got to be in the moment, mate. Be in the moment. You got to be there with it.
The thing that I notice though, if it's a one-off workout, you can still do it. But to do it over a 2-day competition in every workout, that's where I struggle now, because I've just not got that training volume behind me to be able to recover and go again 2 hours later like I used to. Yeah,
that is the thing. It's just being able to tap into that intensity on And I think, that is probably where a lot of people experience CrossFit and they think, I can hang with the best on this workout. But those people could do that 5 times in one day for 2 to 3 days and, take a nap between workouts and all of that stuff. Whereas you do that once, you go into the second workout and you're fucking cramping everywhere, even in places where you're not even using those muscles. CrossFit is the endurance side of CrossFit, where I think CrossFit, we call it an endurance sport. I think it comes from that ability to just put yourself in a hole and then, do it again in a bit. Just think of like the intensity that some people used to hit in workouts, back in the day with classic benchmark workouts and stuff like that. The fitness, the power, the strength was there and it is there, but the difference between what people are like now in terms of competition is that they're just able to withstand just so much more. I think I heard on the podcast, I think Boz says that they are looking to change that, so we shall see. So another change, bloody hell. So circling back a little bit, I know we were saying that in-person competitions are really good and everything like that, but the biggest hurdle and probably the thing that is, I would say, the most challenging part of the process is qualification, and just the whole process, the stress that goes with that, leaderboards, the potential of repeating the workout. People doing 5 minutes of the workout and thinking, I don't feel good. I'll do it again tomorrow or something like that, and then derailing a whole 2-3 weeks of training because you've got these 3 workouts that you need to do. I do much prefer the qualification where they release all the workouts in one go and they give you a time frame to do them. But yeah, that is probably, and also for a certain type of athlete, I was one of them. Those types of workouts are not as enjoyable, and it definitely takes a lot more strategy. I know that you might have different feelings towards that though.
It depends. I don't know. I never used to enjoy qualifiers in the sense of how I would have to deviate from what I wanted to do in a week to fit them in. But I did have the ability, I think, to, when I needed to just turn it on and go for it, which on a qualifying workout is what you need, especially like you say with the nature of the workouts, particularly in the past when like open workouts, how they would typically be, then that definitely played more to my strengths. But I think it is interesting seeing how different people approach qualifiers, and you get the people where they're quite happy to do it once and they're confident in their ability and they know that, obviously it depends on the competition a little bit, but they can do that workout once at the start of the week and forget about it. And then you get the people who very much will think every little detail of the qualifier through, have planned an incredibly intricate strategy, and if they don't get it right the first time, they're quite happy to do it multiple times through the week and sacrifice other parts of their training. And I think there's not necessarily a right or wrong. I think it would be wonderful if you could coach people and they were all quite relaxed about it and they only needed to do it once and were happy with their score, but that's just not the reality. So I think for me, it's just understanding that person and giving them the space to perhaps approach it in the way that works best for them, and more being there to support it as opposed to tell them what to do. And I think especially when it comes to the bigger comps, the qualifiers are so important now, and there's such small margins between people who, even like, someone who qualifies 10th and someone who qualifies 60th, like the margins can be tiny. So if there is things that people can do to make that jump, then I think just talk to them, watch the videos if they've filmed it, go through the strategy with them so that they do get that best possible qualifying score. I think, again, I've always been someone who's not strategized too hard. I think I've generally just relied on my ability to start the workout, adapt on the fly, and tweak it if I need to. Whereas I know for some people, they need that really rigid, I'm going to finish the burpees on 56 seconds and have a 4-second transition. But I think that can be counterproductive, because I think the trouble there is if you deviate from that plan unintentionally, it's then hard to keep going, because all of a sudden it's out the window. And if you can't think in that moment, especially when you're tired, about how to adjust, then you can throw yourself off completely.
Yeah, and if you follow something to that detail, you've undercooked it so much. Because, if you ask someone, okay, go through a 2K row test, as measured and as planned as you can, and people, they start off with a sprint for the first 250, then they're easing into like about 1500 of just staying with it, and then they're trying to sprint towards the end. There's a general strategy there, but some people, they might break down every single split. But if you are absolutely going for it and you want the best result possible, there's no, you're thrashing the hell out of the rowing machine by the end of it, and that's a completely different feel. And I think if you can keep your composure to that. It might be a case of, in the middle of the beginning of a workout, don't strategize it so you don't fuck yourself up and you don't go out too hot. I think that's probably the best thing you can do when it comes to a strategy, I think. But I think that sometimes people have pacing charts and stuff for a 20-minute AMRAP, and I'm like, that's not gonna. You're gonna get to 15 minutes and you're gonna be nowhere near that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think that's something that you can practice in training too, though. I think there's times either within a week or within certain times of year when I'll say to people, don't plan this workout, just go for it. Just see what happens. Find your limits so that if it comes up, or if something similar comes up in a competition or a qualifier, you know where you stand. And then there's other times where I'll say, think a little bit more about the strategy, focus on this, this, and this, and give them a little bit more guidance so that they get used to both and they can figure out what works well for them, but they also learn how to go between the two depending on what they need to do. You know, because like you say, if it's a qualifying workout that's 20 minutes long, there's a degree of strategizing that you need to do. If it's 3 minutes long, then pretty much it is just go for it. Unless there's something in there that they really struggle with and they need to think about. So it's about having that adaptability and being able to adjust on the fly, I think, that separates some of your more experienced athletes who can kind of think their way through a workout as opposed to just doing it and seeing what happens, you know?
Yeah, one thing I picked up from Training Think Tank, and I just sort of copied the idea, was their weekly throwdown. And I think everyone pretty much does some form of this, but Saturday workouts or final day of the week workouts are just always going to be some form of more varied CrossFit workout where I'm not going to give you a plan, I'm not going to give you any RPE, you just maximize the results. So it gets people used to movement combinations that don't necessarily make sense from a training perspective, right? Unless you are trying to train grip, you're not going to combine chest bar pull-ups with a DT barbell complex. There's certain things which are just going to limit your intensity big time, and that's if you're looking for fitness adaptations. So it gets people used to those combinations. It gets people used to bottlenecks, actually messing up, and having to sort of rethink things and go through things again. And I think that can be very helpful because it's a skill as well of just being able to turn it on, like in the gym, without a crowd, without whoever it is. It's Saturday at 2 p.m. You just finished coaching all the morning classes and you've got to go through a workout and you actually want to go out in the sun and be hanging out and go to the beer garden or whatever it is. If you are, if you are wanting to take this up as a sport seriously, you've got to learn how to do that. But I think the qualification with the biggest hurdle is probably just managing everything, like the logistics around it. I think it's just sort of you do get people who are pretty level-headed, they trust in their fitness. But I think if someone has the ability to just have a bit more oversight and a bit more control over a result, that can sometimes get a bit out of hand, where they feel like they need to have everything around them absolutely perfect. And hey, we've probably both seen some interesting things when people were doing qualifier workouts in our times, some drama or this or that, and it's
tears, people kicking water bottles, all that kind of stuff.
But I remember I would do open workouts at the quietest possible point of the gym, no one around. You try and link up with another coach or something like that and say, okay, we're just going to judge each other on the workouts, make a bit of a commitment on that front so you don't have to deal with other people. Warm up for, do a warm up that might take you bloody an hour just to do a 10-minute workout. That was the worst thing. The shorter the workout, the longer the warm up needed to be. And then you just got to pump up the music and just crack on with it. And maybe your video goes and you lose your battery, or you didn't put airplane mode on, or you didn't have a backup. Fucking hell. So I've had some situations in the past, but I always get athletes to actually go through and practice setting everything up, especially if they're new to competition. I say, it's a Wednesday workout. I want you to do this like it's a competition. You need to this needs to be uploaded up onto YouTube by Thursday when I check my notifications and results. And in that way, they just get used to the deadline. And because I've had it in a couple of times where I'm like, I think back in the day, my shitty iPad would not upload to YouTube very quickly, and I would just be put my iPad on charge for about 3 hours whilst it was slowly uploading this 30-minute video to YouTube.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if I should admit this or not, but
go on.
There was one time when I missed it. I had done the workout, I had my score all before the deadline.
Yeah.
But it wasn't uploaded to YouTube. Yeah. But you had to put in a link to submit your score.
Yeah.
So I would take another YouTube link from another qualifying video and put that in the submission box. So I could still submit my score, thinking, what are the chances of them checking the video?
Yeah.
Submit it. They never asked for the actual video.
Yeah.
But I had it if I needed it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
then if they would have asked for it, you could say, oh, sorry, I just submitted the wrong link.
I think I may have done that, or I may have trained with someone who did something similar to that. But yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, what was your favorite ever qualifier workout?
Oh, that's easy, hey? You gotta go with 15.1 when I got top score in the world.
Oh yeah, fucking A. All right, yeah.
Not because it was my favourite workout, just because it was my best result.
Not without kicking off a turf war in Leeds, though, eh?
Oh, well, some people, they just can't handle young up and coming kids taking them to school.
Mate, my favorite one is 16.5. The
Go on, remind me which
21
one.
down 3 thrusters and burpees. Yeah. Both occasions I did that workout, I got a pretty decent score, and I think I knew it was the type of workout you could not repeat, and I just absolutely laid it all out there. And I think I remember going against people, and I did this thing where I'd like drop the barbell, and as I dropped the barbell, I would keep one hand on it, guide it down to the floor, and do like a burpee as I was like dropping the bar on the floor. And I knew that was like the thing. If I could fucking keep doing that, it would just like keep that motivation there for me to keep pushing. And then in both situations, I did the repeat on like the Monday. So I did it first on Friday. Both situations on the repeat, I think I would get to like the 18s or the 15s. And I'll be like, no, I'm not doing it. I know.
You've got to be brave when you're repeating a workout like that, because you know what's coming. And if you want to beat your score as well.
I also think though, it's just, yeah, mate, that takes up like I think a lot of people they underestimate the amount of energy it takes just to be able to put yourself in those situations on like a repeated basis. The amount of times similar, very high output workouts, people are just like, yeah, I'm not doing that again. They said 3, 2, 1, go, and I thought, fuck it.
Can't remember. It was 2014, and it was the one they repeated it. I think last year or the year before, and it was like rowing, wobbles, toaster bar, power cleans, muscle ups. And it was 2014, so it was the year I qualified as an individual, and muscle ups weren't my thing. Like, I could do them, but I didn't love them, especially in that kind of volume. And I remember doing the workout and only getting like 2 or 3 muscle ups on the Friday, and just completely fell out with the workout. Didn't want to do it again. And it got to the Monday night, and I think at that point you could submit it on the Monday, like midnight.
Yeah, especially in the UK, yeah.
And I was sat in the bath at like 8 o'clock on Monday night, just getting really wound up with myself about like my score, and knowing that there was a good chance it was what was going to stop me qualifying. And I think I text Mike and was like, are you going to be at the gym at 9? And he's like, yeah. So I literally got into the gym about 8:45, warmed up for 15 minutes, did the workout, and I ended up like finishing almost, I think I had 1 muscle up left. And that, like, it turned out to be the difference. But
I remember that. I remember you, yeah.
Yeah, it's having that kind of mindset to be able to do that when you need to is tough.
Yeah, because I remember that. It was 14.4. For me, everything in that workout was just, it was like damage control until I could get to the barbell. I was like, I knew if I could get to the barbell at like a certain point, I'd be all right, because I'd be able to just hang on for the muscle ups. I still got the video up on YouTube, but that open was like the best open, because it was the first open. It was the first open they had to have video review, and I remember in Q8 that sort of like kicked up a load of interesting politics, because someone qualified the year before and then couldn't complete like Jackie at regionals. That was the year I made it as well. Despite the deadlift workout, fuck, I got such a bad workout one night. Anyway, enough of
deadlifts and box jumps.
Yeah. Like who? Why be good at those two when you've got all the other fun stuff in CrossFit? Anyway, moving on. Less of the story time. So moving into someone's qualified. Now, the preparation before competition, I would say most competitions are giving you about 2 months. Probably about 2 months. And I generally I used to do this thing where I would try and work backwards from a competition with an athlete and just try to sort of imagine like the perfect build up. And I remember having some energy system progression from OPEX, which would get people ready within 7 weeks for, you know, high intensity efforts. And I think over the years, I think we do this in coaching where we try to really systemize things. We take what is useful and then we just distill it down into a lot more of a simpler system, or you know, in practice it becomes a lot easier to do. But I think now I just tend to obviously map out the first week or the week before and just say, okay, well, we're not looking to sort of achieve anything there. Assess if it's worth doing a run through weekend, which I used to be very keen on, and now I'm a lot less keen on. I think it can be helpful for someone who's like really new and they just don't understand what it's going to be like. You know, just doing a really hard workout at 9 a.m. and then also another really hard workout at 4 p.m. Like that can mess you up a little bit, you know. So just I think that can be helpful, but most people after a bit of time competing, they understand what that's like. So now I just tend to break it down into 2 portions where it's the first portion, so let's say it's 2 months. First month would be more like general preparation. So it would be working on things in a bit more of a structured way, but obviously intensity coming up, more sports specific practice. And then the month previous to the competition, so the second month, it's just a lot of CrossFit. And I think I used to try and create interval structures and this, which is going to elicit a certain response. Whereas now I think that it might be, you might get less like learning from just doing different workouts all the time. Whereas if you're doing a progression, you can really go deep on it and you can learn quite a bit from it. But I think at that stage before a competition, it's not about learning, it's about learning how to perform. So you're not learning how to strategize, you are learning how to strategize better, but you're not necessarily trying to create adaptations and go deep with training progressions in that sense. What you do need is you just need a lot of reps and practice and the ability to turn it on, turn it off, figure it out, do different combinations. Combinations don't make sense. 2 training days next to each other where one day you did, 200 wall balls on a Monday, and then on the Tuesday, you've got to do, hundreds of lunges or something like that, where your legs are going to be completely smashed. I think it's about practicing those things, but doing it in a measured way, obviously.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree with all of that. I think the other things that I would kind of think about is, I think it might not be the best time to focus too much on weaknesses. And it might be more about making the most of your strengths, depending on what those weaknesses are. Like if you are quite close to a competition and the skills which you know that you just can't do or won't be able to do in any significant way by the time the competition comes around, it's a case of, is it worth spending training time working on those things? Because they might not even come up in the competition, depending on what division you're in anyway. But also, for me, I want people going into a competition feeling as confident as possible. And the best way to do that is by doing the things that they're good at. Obviously, yes, you're going to sprinkle in the weaker things, but realistically, by that final kind of, probably realistically, if you take a 2-month window, realistically, you've got 6 weeks of actual training. The time to do that is outside of that window when you can work on all your weaknesses as much as you want. But in that specific 6 weeks, because again, when it comes down to the competition, you're going to look at the workouts which you're going to get the best possible scores on. Yes, okay, it might be damage limitation on some of the others, but the thing that's going to get you up the leaderboard is by really making the most of your strong workouts. So for me, it's a case of get ready, do lots of CrossFit, make the strengths as strong as possible, do the weaknesses in a way that keep you confident. So, let's just say you can do some ring muscle ups. It's a case of still practicing them, but I'm not going to put them at the end of a Metcon when you're exhausted. You know that you're going to hit a wall, because that's going to make you a little bit more nervous about it for when they come up in competition. And just build that as much as you can for that time into leading up to the competition.
Yeah. The point you made about like being pragmatic and okay, you are where you are. Let's stop trying to get butterfly chest to bar and let's just do regular chest to bar and maximize your capabilities there, because you can do more and you can withstand that more. Or the other one could be muscle ups. Okay, let's stop working towards trying to string them together, and let's just get you really good at doing singles and just maximizing what you currently have. Because I think some people think that I don't know if this is we see great and amazing things in competition, but I do think that some people can get into this like fantastical thinking of, wow, I'm going to hit a new rep max of kipping ring muscle ups in the middle of a workout on day 3. It's like, yeah, I don't think so.
I mean, you might, but we can't plan for that.
Yeah, but even then,
that's the thing.
In those situations, you don't, right? In the situations where people are actually, I mean, it's probably happened, but I think in that situation where it did happen, I just would argue that person probably just doesn't train hard enough or doesn't work on them enough. The situations where you are getting a new performance are either going to be like, I think, more conditioning focused stuff at the beginning of competitions. So let's say a 2K row PR on the first or the second workout, or it's going to be getting your first ring muscle up, or getting a snatch PB when you've got the environment and everything like that. It's going to be these sort of one instant, like this one heroic effort that you're able to actually get these types of things going on. It's not going to be, oh, I was only able to do, ring muscle up doubles in a Metcon. In that competition, I was doing them in sets of 3. It's like, I don't think that's happening.
Hey everyone, Matt Harvey here. I produced this podcast that you're listening to or watching just now, so if you like the way that it looks and sounds, that's partially down to me. If you've got a podcast, video, or other online project that you'd like some production help with, or even if you just want to chat through some ideas, drop me a DM or an email. My details can be found in the show notes below. Thanks so much for your time. On with the show.
Yeah, for sure. The strengths as well, that's key, because sometimes competitions in person do score things a little bit differently. And I think, confidence, momentum, all of those factors are huge. And there is always this element when you're going into a competition, or even when you're doing a qualifier, where you actually just put yourself against everyone, or you look at the leaderboard for the first time. And most often, like than not, there's usually an air of not necessarily disappointment, but just, oh shit, the standard's actually a bit better than I thought. And I think that if you, like, that's going to happen. But if you can just get like a couple of performances where you do really well, I mean, hey, that's something which can carry you through a little bit more. It can bring the energy. Whereas if you're just hammering things which are your weaknesses all the time, and you come to a competition and it's, it's something which you feel like you should have performed a bit better on the first workout, like that can just become this like spiraling situation in a competition, especially if people are just not very good at losing. Talking of in competition, I suppose that's where we'll go next. This is a situation where the hard work is done, right? I've definitely played into trying to support my athletes too much. And I think it's just a little bit more of me just trying to be a good coach when I was younger. And I think now I'm just so much more chill about it. And I think sometimes, especially in in-person competitions, if I was there helping someone, I could go a little bit overboard. And with time, I very quickly learned to try and bring that down a little bit, because I think at that stage, you're there to support, you're there to just, I don't know, carry a towel and a water bottle around and make sure they're all good. Strategize if you need to, but hopefully they're in a position where they can do all that stuff themselves.
No, I think strategizing, obviously you can do that before the comp. Most of the time these days, you at least have a day or two to look at the workouts, if not longer in some competitions. So I think for me, most of that kind of stuff's done. I think the unique thing for us as well is we have people competing in different countries where we just can't go. We could be away every weekend supporting people at comps, but that's just not possible. So it's a case of you want athletes to be independent, but also feel supported. But feeling supported is different to every athlete, So You can give them warm-ups, you can give them cool-downs, you can advise them on what to eat, when to eat, all that kind of stuff. And I think, like you say, especially when you're starting out, you almost want to compete for them, but that's not helping them, you know? And when we talk about, especially with beginners, learning the skill of competing, there's an element where they just need to figure it out by themselves and get comfortable in that environment, and you've got to let them do that, you know? So I think, yes, you can be on hand through the day to answer questions, and if something's not gone to plan, they might just need to vent a little bit, or if something's changed and they need a little bit of help kind of rethinking what to do instead, you can be on hand for that. But I think generally, like you say, when it comes to the actual competition day, most of the work is done. And for me, I think what you kind of can do more is play more of a role after the competition, once everything's finished and you've got the leaderboard there and the workouts are done, and you can look very objectively about how they've done across 6 workouts and use that to identify the strengths, the weaknesses, the things that went well, the things that didn't go well. I think that can help the athlete more than perhaps what you can do on the actual day.
Yeah, 100%. I think our role as coaches is we're a facilitator. We're not there to do the thing. It's not in a sport like CrossFit, which is a lot more based around capacity than it is skill. It's not like a rugby coach where you can literally make a couple of little tactical changes. You can tell someone to play a little bit differently or something like that, and it just completely opens up the game and it changes it for the second half. With a sport like CrossFit, like the work is done, the capacity is being built, and it's just about making sure that as a coach you're there to facilitate the best expression of that. And then sometimes that just means being the chill, composed person, telling them to, go chill out, have a nap. I'll keep an eye on the times that you need to be up. Almost just being a bit of a logistical person in that sense. I've definitely had situations where that's worked well. I've also had situations where that's not worked well. And that's like partly just having multiple athletes in one competition and then having everything like that. I think in those situations you got to be. I think one time I saw one coach who I respect quite a bit. I noticed that he had several athletes working in a competition, but he was just with one. And it was just like, okay, I get it. You're just trying to really do a good job with that one person, and it's almost you're trusting where the other people are. And I think, better serving one person rather than doing a shitty job with trying to help out a number of different people can be, I think that's definitely the way to go. But if you don't necessarily have the resources to call on your mate to help out this person or that person or something like that, like that can be difficult, that can be challenging. But you just need to be a bit upfront with what you're actually able to do and how you're actually able to support them. One of the points you said about just looking at where they are and giving them an objective view after the competition, I think one of the things that's really quite good to do as well is just see. You're obviously watching your athlete go through the workout, but just seeing how they are compared to other athletes, compared to the field. How are they going through workouts? Is there something that everyone is doing that they're not doing? One time I remember watching an athlete go through the workout, and I think I just noticed that the barbell was just moving slower than everyone else. They were still able to get through the work pretty well, but it just looked like everyone was just moving it quicker. Whether it would just be, they were just more explosive with the lift. They cycle through the workout, they're able to grunt through it and do pretty well, but I just noticed that, and that sort of led into the next, you call it off-season training block, where it was just, okay, everything needs to be fast, it needs to be explosive. We not, obviously we're not going overboard with it, but it was just having a lot more of a bias towards that type of training. The athlete was strong enough, they were skilled enough and everything like that. It was just, okay, we need to really amp up this level of expression here, keep all the other touches on the sport, make sure you're not getting worse in any other area. And they were advanced enough where they could do that and still hold their own within it. And it was, okay, what's the margin of improvement that you're making there? Okay, going back and seeing them do that workout again, maybe it's a little bit quicker, and but maybe they're still a little bit slower than everyone else. But I would say that working on equality in that sense, it does have these sort of more discreet ways of helping them out in other places as well. And I think that can be something that's even just like little logistical things that they can change and you can encourage them to do in their training, or these more sort of bigger picture things where you're just noticing, they're not as enduring as other people, or energy between workouts. Even stuff like, everyone else has their food prepped, and Lado here is just chowing down some wraps that he got from the coffee shop.
Yeah. No, it's true. I think as well, sometimes, in competition, especially when you're working with people remotely, that is when you're going to see them doing things that you wouldn't normally see. Because you might hear about workouts, you might watch videos of workouts, but it's a very isolated part of their training session that you see. So seeing them compete and seeing everything else around that and how they approach it can be very interesting. It can shed a lot of light on things, and there's been one or two occasions where it's been like, so this is what you do. And to them, they're not even thinking about it. But to you, who perhaps you've experienced a lot, you've competed a lot, it's seeing those little things that actually add up that can make quite a big difference.
Yeah, you see them warm up and it's an absolute shit show, and you're like, this is what your squat depth looks like. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and that wraps it up for today. So this is the final episode of this season. We had a little bit of a switch midway through recording these episodes where we decided to go with a season-to-season approach. We want to build that desire for the next season, and we'll have a little bit of a focus for each season. And this season, it was very much talking about the coaching process, talking about competition, talking about long-term development, how do we develop our priorities with athletes and everything like that. And what we're going to do for the following seasons is we were going to go into a little bit more of a detailed focus on whether it be endurance or weightlifting, or it could be strength work. You're probably not going to get a nutrition season from us, that's for sure. But hopefully what we'll do is we'll be able to get someone, a guest or two in, who is probably going to be a bit more of a subject matter expert, so we can get some outside perspective, but then we can also dive into some of the things that we do in our own coaching as well. So thank you very much for listening, and make sure, if you haven't checked out the previous episodes, that you do check those out, and share this with your coaching buddies. And if you have any requests for whatever topic that we could talk about in future seasons, give us a shout, send us a DM, and we'd love to hear it, and we'll be able to put our heads to it and put out something in the future.